My name is Vance, and I'm 28 years old. The email arrived on a Tuesday, a day that was, until that moment, utterly unremarkable. It was wedged between a confirmation from a linen supplier and a client request for more gold leaf on their wedding invitations. The subject line was a punch to the gut I hadn't felt in a decade. "You're invited! High 10-year reunion!" My heart didn't soar with nostalgic warmth. It sank like a stone in a cold, deep lake. For a moment, I was 16 again, awkward, invisible, and perpetually bracing for impact. The feeling was so visceral that I physically pushed my ergonomic office chair away from my desk, my hand hovering over the trackpad as if it were a hot stove. Before I dive into the sheer, delicious insanity of what happened next, I want to take a moment to welcome you all to my channel. If you're new here, thank you for stopping by. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because you won't want to miss the stories I share about overcoming life's biggest hurdles and finding your own strength. And for my returning subscribers, welcome back. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I love seeing how far our community reaches. Now, let's get back to that email, the digital grenade that landed in my meticulously organized inbox. My life now is a world away from the gray, shadowed halls of High. I run my own business, Vance Premier Events, a boutique event planning company that has somehow become the go-to for the city's elite. My office is a sun-drenched loft in the Arts District, with exposed brick walls I once only dreamed of, and a massive fiddle-leaf fig tree I've managed to keep alive for 3 years straight, a feat I'm arguably more proud of than my profit margins. My days are a whirlwind of vendor negotiations, venue, and timeline management. I orchestrate chaos into perfection, turning frantic dreams into flawless realities. I live in a condo downtown with a view that costs more than my parents' first house, filled with art from local artists and books I've actually read. I have a small, fiercely loyal circle of friends who knew me after I'd shed my high school skin. Friends who see me as the competent, witty, and occasionally over-caffeinated entrepreneur, not Mousy Millie, the girl who ate her lunch in the library to avoid the crossfire of the cafeteria. My typical day starts at 5 a.m. with a run along the waterfront, the city still sleepy and quiet. It's my time to think, to strategize. By 7, I'm at my desk, coffee in hand, color-coded planner open. Today, for example, I was juggling the logistics for the mayor's annual charity gala and a tech billionaire's ridiculously lavish 40th birthday party. The theme for the birthday was Galactic Empire, and I'd spent the better part of the morning sourcing a life-sized replica of a TIE fighter. It was stressful, it was demanding, but it was mine. Every success, every perfectly executed detail, was a testament to the person I had built myself into, brick by painful brick. My finances were solid, my friendships were genuine, and my romantic life was, well, I was happily single, too focused on my company to give much energy to dating. I was content. I was in control. This email, however, was a ghost from a past I had locked away, a past where I had zero control. To understand why this invitation felt less like a friendly gesture and more like a threat, you need to understand my family. I love my parents, I truly do, but their approach to parenting was one of benign neglect, especially when it came to emotional support. My father was a quiet man, an accountant who saw the world in spreadsheets and balanced columns. My mother was a high school science teacher who believed in survival of the fittest, a philosophy she applied to everything from Petri dishes to her own daughter. I have an older brother, Mark, who was everything I wasn't: athletic, popular, effortlessly charming. He was the sun in our family's solar system, and I was a distant, cold moon orbiting in his shadow. Family dinners were a performance. Mark would regale us with tales of his football victories or his student council campaigns. My parents would hang on his every word, their faces beaming with pride. When the spotlight turned to me, it was always a brief, awkward affair. "How was school, Millie?" my mom would ask, already starting to clear the plates. "Fine," I'd mumble. My achievements were quiet ones: a perfect score on a history exam, a prize-winning essay in a state competition. They were acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Mark's upcoming game or his latest girlfriend. They didn't mean to be cruel, they just didn't know how to value what I was. I was a square peg, and they only had round holes. This dynamic reached its peak during a particularly awful school awards ceremony in my sophomore year. I had won a prestigious award for a short story I'd written. It was the biggest accomplishment of my young life. The ceremony was on the same night as one of Mark's junior varsity basketball games, an away game. My parents agonized over the decision for all of 5 minutes. "Millie, you understand, don't you?" my mother had said, her hand on my shoulder in a rare gesture of physical contact. "It's a playoff game. The whole team is counting on Mark." I understood perfectly. I understood that my quiet, solitary achievement couldn't compete with his loud, public one. I sat alone in the half-empty auditorium, my name echoing strangely when it was called. I walked across the stage, accepted my plaque from the principal, and walked back to my empty seat, the applause of strangers feeling hollow and thin. I learned a crucial lesson that night. If I wanted validation, I would have to give it to myself, because no one else was going to. This familial backdrop set the stage for the horrors of high school. Without a strong foundation at home, I was adrift in the shark-infested waters of high. My primary tormentors were a trio that seemed ripped from the pages of a bad teen movie. There was Tiffany, the queen bee. She was beautiful and possessed a unique brand of cruelty that was as sharp as it was subtle. Her boyfriend was Chad Maxwell, the quarterback of the football team, a mountain of muscle with a brain the size of a walnut and a mean streak a mile wide. And then there was Jessica, Tiffany's second-in-command, a chameleon who mimicked Tiffany's every sneer and insult. They, and their rotating court of followers, made my 4 years of high school a living nightmare. My coping mechanism was invisibility. I wore drab, baggy clothes. I kept my head down, my gaze fixed on the grimy linoleum floors. I never spoke in class unless I was directly called upon. But it was like they had loser-detecting radar. The more I tried to disappear, the more they seemed to see me. I have a whole catalog of humiliations stored away in my mind. There was the spaghetti incident of freshman year. I was carrying my tray through the crowded cafeteria, trying to navigate the social minefield to get to my usual empty table in the corner. Chad stuck his foot out. It was so blatant, so deliberate. I went flying. My tray clattered to the floor, and a mountain of spaghetti and marinara sauce coated the front of my white t-shirt. The entire cafeteria erupted in laughter. Tiffany looked down at me, a perfect little smirk on her face. "Oh, clumsy Millie," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You really should watch where you're going." I can still feel the heat of 100 pairs of eyes on me, the sticky warmth of the sauce soaking through my shirt, the sting of tears I refused to let fall. Then there was the sophomore year history project. We had to create a detailed diorama of a historical event. I chose the Battle of Thermopylae. I spent weeks on it, meticulously crafting tiny Spartan soldiers, painting a dramatic mountain pass, even using real sand and rocks. I was proud of it. The day it was due, I placed it carefully on my desk before first period. When I returned from my locker, it was gone. An hour later, during history class, Tiffany and Chad presented my diorama as their own. My tiny, perfect Spartans were now their ticket to an A. I tried to tell the teacher, mister, but he just gave me a weary look. "Millie, are you sure you didn't just forget yours at home?" he asked. Tiffany chimed in. "She's probably just jealous because ours is so good." It was my word against the 2 most popular kids in school. I ended up with a 0 for the project. I went home and cried so hard I made myself sick. That was the day I learned that sometimes the truth doesn't matter as much as who is telling it. But the worst, the absolute lowest point was prom. Senior year, I had no illusions about getting a date. I had already bought a new book to read on prom night. But then, a week before the dance, a boy named from my calculus class approached me at my locker. He was quiet, nice, and definitely not in Tiffany's orbit. He awkwardly asked me to be his date. I was stunned. I was suspicious. But a tiny, hopeful part of me wanted to believe it was real. I said yes. I spent the week in a daze of terrified excitement. I used my savings to buy a dress, a simple, deep blue gown that actually made me feel pretty. My mom, in a rare moment of engagement, helped me with my hair. For the first time, I looked in the mirror and didn't completely hate what I saw. On prom night, I waited and waited. Never showed up. My phone remained silent. At 9 o'clock, my dad drove me to the school, a sad, pitying look on his face. I walked into the gymnasium, my heart a leaden weight in my chest, and saw him. Was across the room, standing with Tiffany and Chad and their friends. They were all looking at me, laughing. Tiffany caught my eye, raised her glass in a mock toast, and blew me a kiss. It was all a setup, a joke, the ultimate humiliation. I didn't even stay for a minute. I turned around, walked out, and had my dad take me home. I threw the dress in the back of my closet and never wore it again. That was the night I promised myself that one day I would be so far away from them, so successful, so happy, that their memory would be nothing more than a speck of dust. And I had done it. I had built that life. Which is why this email, sitting in my inbox like a digital specter, was so unsettling. I clicked it open. It wasn't an official communication from an alumni association. It was a brightly colored, garish. The host was listed as Tiffany, now Maxwell, of course. The location was a rented-out ballroom at the old Crown Plaza Hotel, a place known for being slightly rundown and affordable. The message was overly cheerful. Let's party like it's 10 years ago. Catch up, reconnect, and see who got hot and who did not. Can't wait to see you all there. The casual cruelty of that last line was pure Tiffany. The guest list was public. I scrolled through it. All the old names were there, the jocks, the cheerleaders, the popular kids. And then, sprinkled in like, were the names of a few other people I remembered from the social fringe. People like me. It was a curated list, an ambush. They hadn't invited me because they wanted to reconnect. They had invited me to be the entertainment. They wanted to see Mousy Millie and mock whatever sad, pathetic life they imagined I was living. My initial instinct was to hit delete and block the sender. Let them have their sad little party in their sad little ballroom. But then, a different feeling began to stir. It wasn't the old fear or the familiar shame. It was a slow, simmering anger. A decade of hard work, of building myself up from the ashes of who I used to be, crystallized into a single, defiant thought. No, not this time. My friends, Sarah and Ben, were not on board. I'd met them in a post-grad marketing course, and they were the family I'd chosen for myself. We had our weekly dinner ritual at a cozy Italian place downtown, and it was there that I told them about the invitation. Sarah, a sharp-witted lawyer with zero patience for nonsense, nearly choked on her wine. "You cannot be serious," she said, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "You're actually considering going? It's a trap. A big, glittering, Tiffany-shaped trap." Ben, a graphic designer with a gentle soul and a fiercely protective streak, nodded in agreement. "She's right. What could you possibly gain from walking into that? You've already won. Your life is the win. You don't need to prove anything to those fossils." "I know," I said, swirling the pasta on my plate. "I know you're right. My logical brain agrees with you 100%. But there's this other part of me, this 16-year-old girl who is still hiding in the library who wants to just show up, to not be scared anymore." "There's a difference between not being scared and being stupid," Sarah countered, her lawyer mode fully engaged. "They want a reaction. They want to point and laugh and feel better about their own mediocre lives. Don't give them the satisfaction." Their words made sense, but they didn't quell the fire that had been lit inside me. I went home that night and opened the again. I looked at the venue. The Crown Plaza. My professional curiosity began to twitch. The Crown Plaza was a B-list venue at best. Decent for a regional sales conference, but not for a reunion you wanted people to remember fondly. Something felt off. On a whim, I went to the official High alumni website. It was outdated and clunky, a digital relic. But there, on the homepage, was a small, sad announcement dated 3 months prior. Due to a lack of interest and volunteer participation from the class of our year, the official 10-year reunion has been canceled. We apologize for any inconvenience." My blood ran cold, then hot. It was a sham. The whole thing was a lie. Tiffany hadn't taken over the official reunion. She had created a fake one because the real one didn't exist. She had handpicked her guest list, inviting her friends and a selection of former victims to stage her own personal circus with us as the clowns. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. The cruelty was one thing. I expected that from her. But the deception, the elaborate construction of this event for the sole purpose of public humiliation, that was another level. I stared at the cancellation notice on my screen and then back at the gaudy. And that's when the idea, a wild, audacious, and frankly terrifying idea, began to form in my mind. Ben was right. My life was the win. Sarah was right. I didn't need to prove anything to them. But what if I wasn't proving it to them? What if I was proving it to myself? What if I could take their carefully constructed stage and burn it to the ground, not with fire and anger, but with competence and class? What if I could give my graduating class the reunion they actually deserved, and in doing so, beat Tiffany at her own twisted game? My fingers flew across the keyboard. I opened a new tab and started searching. I found the name of the last president of the alumni committee, a woman named Brenda who had been in the year above me. I found her on LinkedIn. I drafted a message. Then I pulled up the contact information for the Grand Savoy, the most elegant and sought-after event venue in the city. It was a place where I had planned some of my most successful events. It was a long shot to get a booking on such short notice, but I knew the event's manager, David, personally. I had a reputation. I had connections. I had resources. Tiffany had a Facebook group and a mean streak. I suddenly felt a surge of adrenaline, the same thrill I got when a complex event finally clicked into place. This would be the most personal, most challenging, and most satisfying event of my entire career. I picked up my phone. My first call was to David at the Grand Savoy. My second was to Brenda from the alumni committee. "Hi, Brenda," I said, my voice steady and clear. "My name is Vance. You don't know me, but I'm an alumna of High, and I'd like to talk to you about saving our 10-year reunion." The game was on. The next 4 weeks were a blur of controlled chaos. My life became an compartmentalization. By day, I was the unflappable CEO of Vance Premier Events, schmoozing with clients and managing my team. By night, I was the clandestine architect of the ultimate revenge. The first piece to fall into place was the venue. David at the Grand Savoy owed me a favor after I'd saved him from a catering disaster a year prior. "You want the main ballroom on a Saturday night with less than a month's notice?" He'd chuckled over the phone. "For anyone else, I'd say it's impossible. For you, let me see what I can move around." He called back an hour later. A corporate booking had been rescheduled. The ballroom was mine. The cost was astronomical, but I didn't flinch. I considered it an investment in closing a very old, very painful chapter of my life. Next was Brenda. She was wary at first. "The official reunion is canceled, honey," she said, her voice tired. "We couldn't even get 10 people to volunteer for the committee. Nobody cared enough." That's when I made my pitch. "Brenda," I said, my voice resonating with a confidence I didn't always feel. "I care, and I'm not asking for volunteers. I'm an event planner. It's what I do for a living. I will handle everything. The venue, the catering, the music, the invitations. I will fund the entire event myself. All I need from you is one thing, the official, complete alumni contact list for our graduating class." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her suspicion warring with her exhaustion. "You do all that for free?" she asked, incredulous. "I wouldn't say it's for free," I replied honestly. "Let's just say I have my reasons. I want us to have a real reunion, a beautiful one that everyone will remember." She must have heard the conviction in my voice. She agreed. 2 days later, a password-protected spreadsheet with the names and email addresses of all 452 members of my graduating class landed in my inbox. Now I had the guest list Tiffany didn't. She had cherry-picked her audience. I was inviting everyone. I tasked Ben with designing the invitations. I want them to scream class, I told him over coffee, sketching out my vision on a napkin. Thick, embossed lettering, deep navy blue and gold. Elegant, unforgettable. Make Tiffany's tacky look like a coupon for a discount car wash. Ben's eyes lit up. He finally understood what I was doing. This wasn't about confronting bullies. It was about a hostile takeover of the narrative. He delivered the mock-ups in record time, and they were perfect. We sent them out via a high-end digital invitation service that tracked RSVPs, and we also mailed physical copies to the home addresses on file. The heading was simple and official. The official 10-year reunion of High's graduating class of year. The RSVPs started pouring in, far exceeding my expectations. People who had ignored Tiffany's gaudy were intrigued by this new, professional-looking invitation. The buzz began to build on social media. I saw confused posts in old high school alumni groups. Wait, I thought the reunion was at the Crown Plaza. I just got an invitation for the Grand Savoy. Tiffany must have been fuming. She posted a clarification in her private Facebook group. Hey guys, seems there's some confusion. The real reunion is the one I'm hosting. Not sure what this other thing is, probably some kind of scam. Stick with the original plan. But it was too late. The allure of a free, black-tie optional event at the most prestigious venue in the city was far more powerful than Tiffany's. Her RSVP list stagnated while mine swelled. I threw myself into the details with a fervor that bordered on obsessive. I hired the best caterer in the city, the one I used for my most important clients. We designed a menu with gourmet past, a raw bar, and 2 signature cocktails I named The Graduate. I hired a popular local band that played a mix of current hits and 90s 2000s throwbacks. I booked a photo booth with fun props. And for I reached out to a few of our most beloved old teachers and even our retired principal, Mr. Henderson, a man universally respected. I invited them as guests of honor, their tickets and a +1 fully comped. Mr. Henderson, who had always been kind to me, was delighted to accept. The only person who knew the full scope of my plan was Sarah. She had transitioned from skeptic to co-conspirator. This is either the most brilliant or the most insane thing you have ever done, she said, looking over my budget spreadsheet one evening. The catering bill alone is more than my car. I just smiled. It's therapy, Sarah, and it's cheaper than 10 years of it. The day of the reunion, I was a bundle of nerves and pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I spent the afternoon at the Savoy, overseeing every last detail. The ballroom was magnificent. Uplighting cast a warm, golden glow on the navy and cream. The tables were set with crisp linens and elaborate floral centerpieces. A huge ice sculpture of our school's mascot, a panther, presided over the raw bar. At the entrance, I had placed a simple, elegant check-in table. And behind it, waiting to be unfurled at the perfect moment, was a massive, custom-printed banner. Everything was perfect. All that was left was for the guests to arrive, and for the uninvited hosts of the other, phantom reunion to walk into my trap. I went home for a few hours to get ready. I had bought a dress for the occasion, not a slinky, overtly sexy revenge dress, but something far more powerful, a beautifully tailored emerald green jumpsuit that was the epitome of chic sophistication. It spoke of confidence, not desperation. I styled my hair in sleek waves and put on the diamond earrings I had bought myself when my business hit its first 7-figure year. Looking in the mirror, I saw no trace of mousy Millie. I saw Vance. CEO, hostess, and tonight the puppet master. When I arrived back at the Savoy, the party was already in full swing. The low thrum of conversation and music washed over me as I stepped into the ballroom. People were smiling, laughing, hugging. Classmates I hadn't seen in a decade came up to me, their eyes wide with surprise and appreciation. Wow, you look amazing. I can't believe this place. How did the committee pull this off? This is 1,000 times better than I expected. I just smiled, accepted their compliments, and kept my secret. I wanted to wait. I wanted my special guests of honor to arrive. And then, at around 8:30, they did. Tiffany, Chad, Jessica, and a few of their cronies strolled in, not through the main entrance, but through a side door they must have assumed led to their party. They were dressed for the Crown Plaza, not the Savoy. Tiffany was in a tight, sequined mini dress that looked cheap under the ballroom's elegant lighting. Chad was in jeans and a tight black shirt, already looking flushed and belligerent. They stopped dead in their tracks, their jaws slack as they took in the scene. This was not the shabby, B-list party they had planned. This was a gala. Their confusion was palpable. They scanned the crowd, their eyes landing on me as I stood chatting with a group of old classmates near the bar. A slow, malicious grin spread across Tiffany's face. This was it. The moment she'd been waiting for. She nudged Chad, and they began to make their way toward me, a predatory glint in their eyes. The small group I was with seemed to sense the shift in energy and quietly melted away, leaving me alone to face them. They formed a semicircle around me, their posture aggressive, their expressions a mixture of smugness and contempt. Tiffany was the first to speak, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Well, look who showed up, Mousy Millie, all grown up. Chad chuckled, a low, guttural sound. I'm surprised you even came out of your little hole. Didn't think they let librarians out this late. Jessica snickered on cue. The old, familiar fear tried to claw its way up my throat, but I pushed it down. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times. I held Tiffany's gaze, a small, calm smile playing on my lips. Tiffany, Chad, so glad you could make it. Tiffany's smile faltered for a second, thrown off by my lack of a flustered reaction. She recovered quickly. I have to admit I'm impressed, she said, gesturing vaguely at the opulent room. Never thought our little reunion would be this fancy. You must feel really out of place. This was my cue. The moment I had spent a small fortune and countless sleepless nights orchestrating. I took a deliberate sip of my champagne, my eyes never leaving hers. Oh, I feel right at home, I said, my voice cool and even. After all, I planned it. Thanks for coming to my event. The words hung in the air between us. Tiffany's face went through a rapid series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, a flicker of panic, and finally, sputtering rage. Your event, she scoffed, her voice a little too high. What are you talking about, you freak? I planned this reunion. This is my party. I didn't need to argue. I simply turned my head slightly and nodded toward the entrance. My assistant, who had been waiting for my signal, pulled a cord. With a soft whirring sound, the giant 10-foot-wide banner unfurled behind the check-in table, visible to the entire ballroom. The lettering was in the same elegant gold font as the invitations. It read, Welcome to the NORTHWOOD High Class of Year 10-Year Reunion. Sponsored and hosted by AMELIAVANCE, CEO of VANCE Premier EVENTS. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby crowd as people read the words. Every head in the vicinity swiveled from the banner, to me, and then to Tiffany, whose face had gone from flushed to a ghastly, chalky white. The color drained from Chad's face, too. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. For a moment, there was a stunned, perfect silence. And then, as if on cue, the band finished their song and Mr. Henderson, our beloved old principal, walked up to the microphone on the stage. Good evening, everyone. His warm, familiar voice boomed through the speakers. What a magnificent turnout. It's so wonderful to see all of you. Now I know the official reunion was unfortunately canceled earlier this year, and many of us were so disappointed. He paused for effect, his eyes twinkling. But then, a true panther stepped up. An alumna who has done incredibly well for herself decided that our class deserved better. She took it upon herself to organize and fund this entire, incredible evening for all of us. So please, can we all give a huge round of applause to thank our generous host, Ms. Vance? The ballroom erupted. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a genuine, thunderous ovation. People were cheering, whistling. Everyone was looking at me, not with pity or scorn, but with awe and gratitude. I saw people I barely knew smiling at me, raising their glasses. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of validation that washed away a decade of insecurity. I just stood there, smiling, letting it all sink in as Tiffany and Chad watched, frozen in horror. Their grand party, their stage for my humiliation, had been hijacked and turned into a tribute to my success. Tiffany finally snapped out of her stupor. You can't do this," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "I sent out the invitations, I booked the hotel." "You booked the Crown Plaza, Tiffany," I said calmly, turning my full attention back to her. "This is the Grand Savoy, and you didn't send invitations to everyone, did you? You just invited your friends and your old punching bags. I, on the other hand, invited our entire graduating class, because that's what a reunion is." Chad stepped forward, his face red with fury. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he snarled, jabbing a thick finger in my direction. Before he could take another step, 2 discreet but very large security guards I had hired for the evening materialized at my side. They didn't say a word, just stood there, their presence a silent warning. Chad, for all his bluster, was a coward at heart. He deflated instantly. The social calculus of the room had shifted irrevocably. People were now actively avoiding Tiffany and her friends. The whispers followed them everywhere they went. "Did you hear? Tiffany's reunion was a fake. She tried to set up and bought the whole party out from under her. Can you believe the nerve?" They were the joke. They were the losers. They tried to get drinks at the bar, but the bartenders, my bartenders, who I had tipped very generously beforehand, suddenly became incredibly busy every time one of them approached. They huddled in a corner, shooting me poisonous looks, but their power was gone. They were ghosts at a feast they thought was theirs. After about 20 agonizing minutes of being social pariahs, they out the same side door they had entered, their grand exit as pathetic as their entrance. The rest of the night was surreal. It felt like I was floating. Person after person came up to me. Some just wanted to congratulate me on my company and thank me for the party. But others, people who had stood by and watched in high school, came to apologize. A woman named, who had been one of Tiffany's quieter friends, approached me with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I was always so scared of Tiffany. I knew what she did to you was wrong, and I never said anything. I felt guilty about it for years. What you did tonight, it was incredible." I accepted her apology and the dozen others like it. It wasn't about rubbing their noses in it. It was about accepting that we were all different people now. We had all grown up. Well, most of us. I even reconnected with a few quiet, kind people I'd forgotten about, and we exchanged numbers, making plans to get coffee. For the first time, I felt like I belonged to that graduating class. I hadn't just thrown a party. I had reclaimed a piece of my own history. It's been 6 months since the reunion. The ripple effects from that night have been subtle but significant. My business, Vance Premier Events, got an unexpected boost. Several of my former classmates, now doctors, lawyers, and tech entrepreneurs, were so impressed that they've since become clients. My company's profile has been raised considerably, and I've even been featured in a local business journal. It turns out that pulling off a legendary act of classy revenge is fantastic for marketing. The article mentioned the reunion, framing it as an act of incredible generosity, which it was, but I'll always know the delicious, darker truth of its origins. As for Tiffany and Chad, their humiliation was not confined to that one night. The story of the dueling reunions became the stuff of legend. It spread through social media like wildfire. People they had known their whole lives saw them for what they were: petty, cruel, and ultimately pathetic. I heard through the grapevine that the fallout was brutal. Chad, who was a car salesman at his father's dealership, apparently lost a few big sales when clients who were at the reunion recognized him. Tiffany, who fashioned herself as a local socialite and mommy blogger, lost followers and brand partnerships when the story got out. Her carefully curated image of a perfect life was shattered by the reality of her spiteful character. They have both since made their social media profiles private. They didn't just lose the battle that night, they lost the entire war. They wanted to expose me as a loser, but all they did was expose themselves. My life is better than I ever could have imagined back in the halls of high. My company is thriving, and I'm even in the early stages of expanding to a second city. My friendships with Sarah and Ben are stronger than ever. We still laugh about that night, calling it the Great Reunion Heist. And I even went on a few dates with a guy I reconnected with at the party, an architect named Mark who I'd had a silent crush on in physics class. It's still new, but it's nice. It feels easy. He sees me for who I am now, with no baggage from the past. But the biggest change has been internal. Standing up to my bullies didn't magically erase the scars of the past, but it transformed them. The memories of the spaghetti, the diorama, the prom, they no longer have power over me. They're just stories about a girl I used to know. The real lesson I learned wasn't about revenge. It was about realizing that I had the power to write my own narrative all along. For 10 years, I let them live in my head as the victors, the popular kids who had defined my high school experience. But that night, I took back the pen. I realized their opinion of me was, and always had been, completely irrelevant. My worth isn't determined by their judgment, but by my own actions, my own integrity, and my own success. I would tell my 16-year-old self, crying in her room after the prom disaster, that it gets so much better. That the people whose opinions feel like the whole world right now will one day be nothing more than a footnote in her incredible life story. The best revenge isn't loud and angry. It's quiet, it's competent, and it's living a life so full and happy that they can't even touch it. Thank you so much for listening to my story tonight. It's a reminder that no matter how bleak things might seem, you have the strength within you to change your circumstances and define your own future. If you've ever had a moment of vindication against someone from your past, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Let's celebrate our victories together. And as always, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more stories of empowerment and overcoming adversity. Remember to be kind to yourself and never let anyone else tell you who you are.